Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day or night it may well be for you, and welcome to the Network One's Indie Forum Digital Week Ice Cream for Everyone Playful Strategy Parlour webinar semi-mock redux. It's a very short and easy, easily digestible, memorable title, don't you think? So this has been extremely interesting for anybody watching. Presumably you've attended or you registered to attend the live webinar. And obviously, as you may well notice, this is not a live webinar. I'm calling it a semi-mock. I'm really, really thankful to the whole team, Julian, Lizzie, Stephanie at the Network One, for being willing to be to entertain my wanting to be experimental and testing new tools, and even more so ambitiously testing multiple different digital collaboration tools and try to be recorded at the same time. So things honestly did not go the way I expected them to at all during the webinar. I believe mostly people had fun and were entertained or thought it was interesting. So my lowest bar was I was hoping that I would be entertaining at the very least, hopefully interesting, ideally valuable. I placed it a little bit like this, and I had to roll with it. Things did not work on the technical fashion as well as I hoped at all. And if you attended the session, and if it wasn't working for you video-wise, if it was pixelated, I apologize. We also didn't have a backup video, so the video was not pixelized. Hence, us discussing with the Network One team and saying, actually, maybe it's a little bit better if we record another version that might look a slightly more like what I was hoping it would, with the downside of it not being a live session. So this is what I'm doing now. So we're always learning, and I'm always learning and testing new things. And additionally, I guess on one hand, I never like not to feel like it went as well as I wanted. And I, obviously want to look good. So it doesn't feel like it felt embarrassing that it didn't work technically. And at the same time, what would I be if I didn't practice what I preach? And I preach creativity, I preach new ideas, I preach testing new things. And in these age of pandemics, there's even more opportunities to be trying new tools, hacking them. And I had written before doing the webinar a whole presentation about a variety of different online digital collaborative tools. And additionally, on top of the webinar, I re-recorded another one. I thought I had the right setup doing it with Zoom and turning on my screen share and my camera, and it did not behave the way I wanted. So add another couple of hours, add another 2 hours trying to understand the Zoom settings on the website, add like 20 more test videos, finally wiping everything down, forgetting about it, doing 2 more tests with open broadcasting software, OBS, the software I'm using now, which I thought my computer couldn't use anyway. Long story short, I apologize. You're probably not even interested in hearing any of this. But, in the age of having to suddenly learn a lot of new skills to work remotely and to have this distance of a screen between us, and learning the best tools for either a live collaborative exercise or for sharing, like you're going to be watching, like with a delay, and for me to find the best way to record it with my very limited material. I have an audio podcast, so I have a microphone. That's something that I do have. But all the rest of it, I've been learning on the spot for the past few months, and learning new ways that these tools behave. So anyway, by way of a long intro, here we are. Hopefully this is going to be the right one. Fingers crossed. And welcome to this semi-mock webinar. I'm calling it a semi-mock webinar because one of the main things I wanted to do during this webinar workshop was, one, for it to be interactive, and to show off Miro.com as one example of multiple different digital virtual whiteboards you can be using that I've been using for a while now, since the end of last year, for other purposes, for friends who told me about it from a gaming perspective, because it's a virtual table, if you will, or a virtual whiteboard. And I've used it also for workshops, and it works extremely well. And not a lot of people have used Miro or those kinds of tools. As I said, I created a presentation talking about different kinds of online collaborative tools. And there's a disclaimer at the bottom, just to be very clear. I am not affiliated either with Zoom or with OBS or with Miro. OBS is an open source software anyway. But it's one of the many different tools I use. And part of the ambition was that it didn't behave exactly the way I wanted. So anyway, here we are now. I am showing you through the Miro whiteboard. I'm going to show you what participants during the live webinar did in the board, because I left it so that's why I'm calling it kind of a semi-mock. So it's live after the fact, if you will. Now, they hadn't finished the whole exercise because things didn't work the way I planned, so I filled in the gaps that were at the end, and I'm going to talk through everything. And this was an extremely long intro before I even talk about who I am. If you don't know me, obviously you can see the name of my business is Ice Cream for Everyone, and the name of my blog. So I did multiple tests with this beforehand. In principle, while it might not be the smoothest possible, and this is down to just purely the power of my graphic card on my computer, it should be clear enough and not pixelated. Anyway, my name is Willem van der Horst. I call myself a playful strategist. My background is one in graphic design in the communications industry. In the first place, that was a long time ago. I was born in the United States and then raised in Paris. I lived around the world many years in London, several years in Asia, including Singapore, and some traveling around Southeast Asia and China, and some time spent in Laos and in Thailand and in Malaysia, and traveled again, spent more time in Europe and in London, and then the past few years in the States, in Chicago. So we have a little bit of a visual standpoint here of various of my interests and a lot of my different kinds of experience. I worked in coaching as well as training and development before transitioning towards digital strategy, working with advertising, branding, and marketing agencies. That's what I've been doing for the past 13 years. And what I do now, I've worked full-time with a number of different agencies, as well as contracting and freelancing and consulting with agencies. Nowadays, so as you can see, a lot of the different types of logos and companies. I'm a bit of a jack of all trades, I have to say. I started on the digital marketing side of things, and then I had the chance of working on more traditional communications and advertising, as well as experiential campaigns. So that might be events or types of communication that mix a number of different things, such as working with Hertz Rent-A-Car and their global recruitment team on 10 years ago, how to use social media to improve their recruitment processes. So that's something that we worked on. But on the other side of Hertz Europe, I was also working on, how do we do the marketing communication campaigns for their partnership with the Wimbledon tennis tournament, championship. Tennis Open, Tennis Championship. I apologize, I don't have the right tennis vocabulary, even though I do watch Wimbledon from time to time and I do enjoy it. So yeah, I've worked at Toyota and Lexus in Asia Pacific while I was working with Saatchi & Saatchi in Singapore, Lenovo in Asia Pacific as well, BBDO in Chicago, Energy BBDO was working with SC Johnson on global strategy. So I've had the chance of working on local communication and brand strategy work, as well as regional Asia Pacific, United States, South America, Europe, as well as London. I mean, a lot of different kinds of projects, a lot of different kinds of verticals, as you can see here. And now I work directly with clients, advising them on their brand or their communications or the way they appear to the world. I'm particularly interested in working with businesses who have a commitment to being responsible from a society perspective, whatever that might mean for that particular business. And I am currently working with a friend on developing material to look at what does it mean to communicate and do marketing from a responsible fashion. How do you develop guidelines from a corporate social responsibility perspective that are really integrated inside of your brand and inside of your business overall? So that's a little bit of the future thinking. And down here we have, this covers the wide variety of everything I've been doing. Anything from the podcast that I record, videos that I record, both to keep educating myself and keep learning about the industry, keep learning about my point of difference, which is play. And that's something I'm going to talk about a little bit more in the video. So while a lot of other consultants may talk about brand and strategy, I make my point of view about including play and perhaps game-like elements in the work that I do, whether it be with agencies and work directly with clients as a consultant as well. And I'm interested in well-being, so I meditate. I'm interested in personal development and coaching methodologies because there's a lot of exercises there. I'm interested in improv comedy. I'm interested in strategy overall. I'm interested in games. Lots of different areas of interest. I'm trying to do a lot more material in French now that I've moved back to Paris as well. But let's move on. So what I'm going to do now is the next point that I had is I recorded a very down and dirty video, but for the purposes of making sure everything's really smooth, I'm going to cut right now and show you the video, and then I'm going to come back to the live. No, it's not live, it's a recording. I'm going to do this right at some point. Well, hello from Paris. Sadly, nobody gets to go to Cannes for the festival this year. It's obviously been cancelled. but I thought I'd try to mix things up a little bit in a very lo-fi fashion. Don't expect anything extraordinary from a video standpoint. But, you know, we've got Notre Dame Cathedral, and I thought I'd mix things up and show you around Paris while I tell you about Play. All right, come on. Believe me, I can talk about brands, marketing, communications, and even symbols from a theoretical standpoint quite knowledgeably and for quite a while. So I'm going to limit this video for just a few points about play and playful strategy that I think are worth sharing with you. From a pragmatic and professional standpoint, I invest quite a bit of time in understanding how people behave the way they do and why they buy the things they buy. What brands, products, and services really mean to people, and what it means for a brand to generate a competitive advantage. That said, while I like to think that I'm pretty good at what I do, I also know that there's a lot of other smart and talented strategists that offer exactly the same kinds of services. Play as a state of mind and a set of methodologies is the unique vector and really the differentiator for me when I work with agencies and with clients to get to the brand new and original ideas that will generate competitive advantages and new business results for them. We probably rarely think of play in those terms and generating new ideas because we've been trained in thinking that is the opposite of work, and we have a lot of work to do in our grown-up, very serious, busy lives, right? But actually that's not accurate. Work is not the opposite of play. Play as a phenomenon and as a state of mind is an inherent part of nature. All animals play, and us human beings included. We do this from a very young age, and nobody has to explain to us very simple forms of play. We just do it instinctively. And arguably, we human beings have the most complex forms of language and societies, and in turn, we play and design the most complex of games to go along. I've studied several books and texts about play. For example, there's a classic from French sociologist Roger Caillois, Les Jeux et les Hommes, Man, Play and Games, which is really a reference and seminal book. I've also read several texts from Dr. Peter Gray, a psychologist at Boston College, and all of them have very similar definitions of play. There are 5 core characteristics for play. 1. Play is voluntary. It's self-chosen and self-directed. Players are free to quit at any time, and I can't actually force you into play. Number 2, play is an activity in which the means are more important than the end. Number 3, play is guided by mental rules. Number 4, play is imaginative in some way. It's not literal. It's marked off from the rest of reality in some specific way usually. Number 5, play involves an active, alert, but not stressed frame of mind. In The Value of Play, psychologist Dr. Peter Gray says, and I quote him here, "The alert but unstressed condition of the playful mind is precisely the condition that has been shown repeatedly in many psychological experiments to be ideal for creativity and the learning of new skills." And that, quite simply, is my goal for play when I think of strategy workshops, activities, and seminars. Said another way, this is how I define playful strategy. Firstly, it's a plan of action to achieve a long-term goal born out of the creativity provided by a play state of mind. Secondly, it's the use of structured play, including game-like elements, to generate new ideas, fulfill on goals, and overall achieve unprecedented business results. Among the more paradoxical aspects of play is that while it doesn't seem to be immediately productive, it activates the mind in such a way that it generates a huge amount of energy, inspiration, and new ideas that help in turn solve a lot of challenges and problems. Overall, the best is to show and not tell, so I'm going to hand it over to future Willem over in the live webinar, and I hope to see you in Paris sometime soon. All right, so now we're back, and now we'll move on. So we talked about this whole notion of play, and I just wanted to show you something else here that I have prepared to underline this notion that we have really anchored in ourselves, or that we've trained to have, to think of play as the opposite of work. and that play is something that really belongs a lot more to the young people, to the childhood, and to the past, which is not wrong. There's a lot more space for play for children, of course. But at the same time, the interest and study of play as a behavior and as a phenomenon is really fascinating to me. And particularly in finding out that play is not actually the opposite of work, because play is, in fact, a lot more, given all animals play, and we're observing, and psychologists and biologists and researchers observe this phenomenon with all animals and as part of nature. So it's more like an emotion. I think it's more accurate to think of play as an emotion. So, and along a spectrum. So we can think of the presence of an emotion like joy along a spectrum. There's no joy, a little bit of joy, a lot of joy, right? Or stress, a lot of stress, not a lot of stress. Play, we can also evaluate along the same kind of spectrum. It's not like all or nothing proposal. It can be. But work, on the contrary, because it's a lot more something that has been made up, and it's a construct that we have made up in our human societies. I could talk a lot more about the made up construct, and you may well be debating in your mind with me, but that's not the point of this particular webinar, but please feel free to contact me to debate that. But let's say you work in an office or you're employed by someone, you're either working or not working. That's 100%. That's like black or white. You're either working or not working. And while you are working or not working, there are various degrees of, you could be playing while you're working. You could be stressful while you're working or not stressful. You could be joyous, happy while you're working and not. And all sorts of other kinds of emotions may be present at various degrees, but the presence of work is a separate phenomenon that happens at the same time. So I thought it's very interesting. And this is opening the door to a lot of different topics potentially, but that's not the purpose of this workshop, because I really wanted to make it something quite interactive. So before we move on to the exercise, that said, to make it just a tiny bit more real for people, I wanted to make sure I showed a little bit of a case study. So last year I had the chance, so this is an example from last year. I had the chance of working with an independent agency in Chicago called Tom, Dick, and Harry Creative, and with their client Optiver, who works in, Optiver is a global trading firm in the money market business. And they came to Tom, Dick, and Harry with a particular conundrum, was that this was their branding before talking to us. And while there's a global business, this was very much a United States preoccupation. And what was going on with them is that they were head-on competing with some of the largest and richest, most valuable companies in the world, such as Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, in addition to the traditional competitors in the trading space, as well as financial institutions such as Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, etc. So, and while, they're a very successful company, they did not have the amount of resources to go on campus to hire the best potential talent necessarily. And more candidates were asking them questions about their branding anyway, so they had a number of questions to look at from that standpoint. So I did a very traditional amount of brand strategy, but some of the areas that where I included play was to help them look at, with these cards, and this is just a sample, with these cards, to facilitate the discussion on what their brand should be about for themselves and for potential hires. So as you can see, for people to have individuals in the workshop to have their own decks with all the different words is one of the ways to bring props and to generate more creativity, which I say leads in turn to more. So play equals creativity equals results. And it's not a straight up equation. There's a lot more to it, of course. And then another exercise that we did, and I'm doing this on purpose not to spend too much time on it, but you've seen that there were, because it's confidential, while the work is already out, the work that we did specifically, but it's not a secret to tell you that we worked on an exercise that had a mix of user flow, user journey from design thinking, as well as role-playing games that allowed me and allowed the team to get a lot more insight about the team and the people that were hired there, that had been working there both for a while and very recently, and why they were happy, what was the best match for that company, and to find out more about who are we looking for exactly and how are we going to be attracting them in the best way possible. And this is, once we went through all the process and working with the creative team at the agency, this is the creative executions that they came up with. all around an area of being bold, and a pun and a play of words on Optiver, opting in, and very attractive. So there's very small amounts of real estate in those recruitment drives in a big hallway in a university where you have, one big banner, as you can see on the side here, just above my video, wanted engineers. So there's very little amount of real estate that a recruiter has to be able to show off and attract the attention of some of the best candidates without even knowing if the best candidates are going to be there. Because part of the problem was not attracting talent, because they had a lot of people apply when they did recruitment drives, but it was like, how do we improve the amount of people that we know are going to really, really like the opportunity of working here? Because in fact, they did have a very low turnover already. Like, people, once they found the right kind of candidates and employees, they found the right people who were very happy. So the whole point was, how do we communicate that in the best way possible? Now, I went a little bit nervously ahead, and I apologize. I forgot to mention the Icebreaker. So one of the questions I have, it is my thing's called Ice Cream for Everyone. My company was started out as my blog, and it is my podcast now. And now I'm veering into trying to doing video and learning about it, as I said, with my very long monologue diatribe at the very beginning of the video. And one of the ways I use to break the ice, because it's kind of fun, is what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? And people in the interactive webinar wrote in Post-it notes and wrote like dark chocolate and orange, and I prefer tacos and vanilla. And right now I am showing you off the tool. So right now I am here. I can type in peanut butter and dark chocolate bits. So I love ice cream, of course, and there are stories behind the name of Ice Cream for Everyone, but that's for another time. So I can show you here what's going on with Miro. And Miro is an online collaborative white tool. So, and you can see the interface here. This is me, Willem van der Horst, as it shows. And then we have other participants here. Because I gave them the open link, we have some people still wandering around. There was I gave a lot of content inside of the whiteboard for people to check it out. We have somebody who just doodled around their dark chocolate answer. And here we have all these different functions just to show you a little bit. So here, this is to put a Post-it down, and then I can write the Post-it note. And the whole tool has a lot of different design templates. So for those into project management, we've got Kanban frameworks, we've got concept maps, brain writing, we can do mind maps with this tool, customer journey map. There's a lot of different options with this. And then quite simply, you can design shapes. As I said at the beginning, I'm not affiliated, but this, honestly, from a collaborative perspective, this Miro is my favorite tool, along with probably Mural. I tend to prefer Miro. So that we have all sorts of shapes. And when you're working with other people, you see everybody's cursors so that you see where they are. And actually, it turns out that, and it's one of the things that was maybe not great when I did the live version of the webinar via Zoom as well as Miro at the same time, is that when I run these kinds of sessions, I find it more efficient and useful to have calls happen from an audio perspective. So if we're using the Zoom, just turn off the cameras, because once we're in the Miro tool, all we're looking at happens here, and we can see, oh, there you go. All right, so we got a guest that showed up, right? So we can see this guest, and they're looking around. I added a Post-it to say, please don't look around. And so you can see in this Miro board, Miro is an infinite size whiteboard. So all of this was material that I put so that people could look around and play around. I put this giant flowchart that is a little bit of a joke, a little bit provocative, but I said, hey, if you want to look, then you can play around with this. Or I made this other thing that is called Consult the Oracle. It's a bit of a playful game as well. And then I added a bunch of slides, and there's case studies on the side so people can read my case studies. It's a little bit of free promo. And then people started doodling. Now, of course, because people had full editing rights, and we were having some slight issues with the video, it's turned out into very interesting results. So then we moved on to this exercise. that for the purpose of this webinar, I created and amended an existing exercise that I had that I called Prismatic Insights Generation. So I don't always have set exercises. Because I work in strategy and because my role is to try to figure out, one, what is the challenge at hand, and really inform what is the question, problem, challenge at hand as much as possible. And then two, once we know where we are, we know exactly what point A that we are at now looks like, and we know a lot about what point B that we're trying to get to looks like, how to get from point A to point B, and that is devising the strategy. And ideally, once we finish doing all that, where I'm going to research a lot of very complex fields of different stuff related to the industry sector, to a brand, to a company, to the competitors, to the audience that we're speaking about, to the current situation, etc., etc. And once I have all of that devised, I'm going to look at, all right, what do I know from my grab bag of play and games and game mechanisms that I can maybe pinch and take to be useful to the whole process. So in this particular case, I did something that was borrowing a little bit from design thinking, a little bit from role playing, a little bit from the wisdom of crowd. And I knew it was quite ambitious that we would have a lot of people participating at the same time. And I thought, okay, well, if we have a lot of people participating at the same time, it might be a little bit chaotic, but what if in only a short amount of time, we can collect a vast amount of insight like a prism, and the idea of the analogy for the prism is that, as you can see on the prism, it will be up here, you have light coming in and very fast you have the whole rainbow coming out. So one thing comes in, a lot of things come out, and it's very colorful and you have a lot of opinions come from everywhere. So the way that it worked was I created these triangle prisms that I set up on the board with post-it notes. So the whole triangle was locked and then the only thing that you could write in was the post-it note. Sorry for the zoom in and out, didn't do that on purpose. And then all the participants could write. So the first point was to look at, for all participants, to create a simple challenge or question. Now, how did I define what that is? A simple challenge or question, I said, involves someone, and preferably yourself, no larger than your business or your family, something, like specifically, ideally. And I recommended everybody to have something smaller than the big question that we're all dealing with called, how am I going to deal with the uncertainty that my business is facing with COVID-19? That I have, that everybody else has, of course, that might be how do I work remotely? So to go a little bit under. And so that's also why I created this, honestly, a little bit of an in-jest joke of consult the Oracle, because I said, well, if your main question is how do I deal with COVID-19 from the big of it, then go to the Oracle. If you want to zoom in a little bit, because I thought, well, in a very short amount of time, more specific is better, and realistic, or at least a real situation that you're dealing with is better. So some time, deadline maybe, or location. So what I said, for example, was how do I approach my tissue meeting with a potential financial services client in Asia Pacific tomorrow? So that was an example. So now, I had these boards prepared, and this flow of the exercise was, one, write a problem, and I'm going to go over all the different problems. I'll show you one example. 2, write a simple challenge or question. 3, move around, pick a different prism. So I knew we were going to have some challenges there, and we did have challenges because we had 45 people moving around. And I had done this kind of exercise and done the Miro, but with less than 10 people. So less than 10 people and not trying to record it at the same time for people to watch later, which is an added complexity from a technical standpoint, to be honest. So writing the first insight, and let's go to explaining how the exercise works. So in this case, it was, how can I best prepare for our agency strategy plan meeting next week? We'll go over all the problems and all the insights at the same time. So the idea was, well, the first step was you write your problem and then move to a different prism. And then in the different prism, write down, all right, now you're looking at somebody else's question or challenge. How would you answer that? All right, so that's kind of a warm-up. And then for the second one, which was that was the blue. And then for the pink one, I said, okay, well, now we're going to start spicing things up a little bit. And we're going to do that little bit of role-playing type thing, or at least imagining yourself in somebody else's shoes. So this is something that I do a lot, that I'm particularly interested in from a leisure standpoint, also game design standpoint, and role-playing games, But also a large part of what I do as a strategist is to think, okay, well, what is it going to be to think of myself in the shoes of the people that we're trying to talk to, trying to sell to? And that might mean as much like in the shoes of the client that this particular agency business pitch is for, or in the shoes of the audience people, that we're trying to sell this shampoo brand to at the end of the day. All right, so let's put ourselves in the shoes of a aging woman that is losing her hair, and that's kind of like a little bit of a taboo thing in a lot of different countries. And I am very far from that. And let's say they're in Asia. I am very far from that as a white male. From mostly Europe, although I've lived in Asia, but I can't pretend that I'm Asian. I'm not Asian at all. As much as, from a humble standpoint, as much as I've been able to discover is to spend a lot more time listening, because I have no idea how much I don't know. And maybe if I glimpse something, then I can have a chance to try to put myself into somebody else's shoes, and at the very least talk to a lot of people who are in those shoes all the time. So now, for a little bit of fun, very far from this kind of example, I said, all right, let's think about a favorite character or celebrity of yours. Maybe a childhood character. And that's why I added Optimus Prime. I mean, Transformers, I loved as a small kid. And what are the traits of that favorite character of yours that you had when you were a kid? And all right, so Optimus Prime is just and honorable. He's a great leader, always striving for peaceful solutions. Or maybe you could be imagining to be in the shoes of Priyanka Chopra, international, worldwide Bollywood celebrity and Hollywood celebrity as well, actually. Promotes a lot of different causes, women's rights, the environment, extremely influential. What would she answer if you're putting yourself in her shoes or in the shoes of whoever your favorite character is? So that's what we did for the second step. And people filled in their blue Post-it notes with the answers of their favorite character. And then we came to the third one. As you can see, we're changing completely. I said, okay, let's spice things up a little bit now. The third version is the the green one. Sorry, pink, green, mixing up my colors. The green one is, all right, think of somebody you don't like, dislike. It doesn't have to be as dramatic as Cruella de Vil, but somebody you dislike for whatever reason, and think of their traits of why you dislike that person. It could be somebody that is a really bad villain. And we have like a real example here, Stalin, like, horrible, tragic dictator. I said, and I just did this a little bit quickly. We could argue on what the traits are. He's a megalomaniac. He's a ruthless dictator. He's intent on fulfilling his vision, whatever the tragic human cost. Cruella de Vil is committed to fashion, whatever the dog cost, apparently, according to the aristocrat. By the way, I just know I'm such a dummy. It's not the Aristocats. It's the 1 in 100 Dalmatians. Anyway. I'm so, okay. I guess we're human, aren't we? I prize myself on liking Disney movies too. Anyway, all right, cool. All right, so we did all that. So now, we did all that. What happened at the very end? Let me share that with you. So we went through all the exercises. What happened in the middle of the exercise, to be completely honest, is like everything went all over the place, and we stopped in the middle because I was also running out of time. So, but I wanted to share with you, one, if you're in the live webinar, you might be interested. Two, hopefully, even if you're watching this after the fact, you might be interested in the kind of exercise and the kind of webinar I can design for you. Or you might be interested in just stealing some of it as well for your next brainstorm. And so here's what we have. 3 different answers to how best to prepare for agency strategy plan meeting next week. The team will need to be confident in what they do, take the time to praise previous efforts and projects put in. Maybe listen to a few different episodes of strategy podcasts, like The Strategy Behind Everything, Sweathead with Mark Pollard. The first one is with Adam Pierno. On Strategy, I think with Fergus. I can't remember his last name, I'm sorry. Or Ice Cream for Everyone. That's a shameless plug. As you guessed, I just filled this in after the fact. Start with a Venn diagram, because all the strategists, that's what they do. Or a 4x4 quadrant, I would tend to say. All right, what's the next one? How can I encourage my law firm client in Australia to go ahead with the rebrand that they postponed? You see, this, I really, really appreciated the participants in the live webinar their willingness to really put a real question. Like, that's a real question. And that's the reason why This is not necessarily hugely animated in this part of the webinar, but I wanted to show you because if you're watching this, you probably signed up for the webinar. You probably are part of an independent agency or affiliated or linked with the Cannes Indie Forum event, or I mean, not Cannes, but the thing not happening during Cannes because it's the same week, that's what I mean. But with the Network One, you might be an independent operator, an independent agency, a consultant like me, working in the communications or marketing industry. One way or another, all the questions that we have on this board may well be interesting to you, and you might be interested in some of the directions and answers that were given in a quite short amount of time. So here we have trust and authenticity is important when selecting a partner. Oh, also last mention, if you happen to have filled some of the Post-it notes during the live webinar, things had moved, so I did my best to associate them back with problems. Please don't be offended if ever I misplaced them. Then insight number 2, best character. Unless mistaken, the legal sector remains busy in this period. And while potentially their customers may try to save costs, investing in their brand can be a way to stay competitive. Quite interesting. Or insight number 3, coming from a villain, you could tell them their biggest competitor is about to steal one of their clients unless they go ahead with a rebrand. So, I mean, this is not anything that I would recommend, but again, it's like the idea that if you're having fun and putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, what kind of ideas come out? In the same spirit of a brainstorm, that there's no wrong answer, right? Okay, what's our next problem? And you may have noticed that we have this little triangle at the bottom. That was because I had a lot of people in the live webinar, and I thought, well, maybe at the end, if you go back, you record which number you are, it's number 3, then at the end you can go back to your problem and get the insights that other people wrote. So in this case, how can I get the time to make more noise from my agency and myself on social media this week? Great question. We never have time for everything. So think of what you know and have experienced that would be most interesting for your most valuable business relations. That is interesting, and that is the content you want to share and get some feedback on. So I guess how I'm taking this, and or at least how I'm interpreting it, is if you don't spend too much time trying to separate what you already have going on in your life or your business life from what you're trying to put out there in social media, then you're going to spend less time trying to work out what you should be doing. Or send out a Friday email wrapping up the past week. I guess it's a little bit the same kind of idea, saying, okay, well, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Talk about what you already have going on. Obviously, respecting people like business confidentiality and client relationship confidentiality, obviously, but there's always ways in which you can talk about what happened without revealing confidential information, I think. Insight number 3, the bad guy. Ask one of your kids to draw something for you every day and post it on social media. Great. Outsource the work. Give it to your kids. Very bad and immoral. But people love, maybe they love drawing of kids. How can I come up with ideas on PR for socialtainment in agency? That is really interesting as a new space. Prioritize important tasks first. Okay, great. Part of the blue Post-it note was getting all the obvious ideas out of the way first as well. Not to be diminishing anybody's individual ideas, but we often say in writing and ideation altogether, I hate to use that word, but although I kind of find ideas interesting, I love ideas and I love making connections. So you get all the bad ideas out. Julie, we talk about that in brainstorming and lateral thinking with exercises as well from the book Edward de Bono, and design thinking, which inspires itself from lateral thinking in the first place. What about you have a look at the meddling teens on TikTok and social media who apparently had a hand in booking tickets for Trump's rally in Tulsa and drowning out, there's another thing they did, apparently drowning out white supremacy hashtags on Twitter with K-pop songs. So a lot of K-pop fans or teens, as far as I can understand it from what's been reported, have used the same hashtags that white supremacists were using in the times of the Black Lives Matter protests that are still happening right now. And instead of having white supremacy content, put out tons of Korean pop music. So all of a sudden, anybody looking at those content were just drowned out by Korean pop. And I mean, I just thought it was hilarious and funny and super interesting. And I don't know if this is socialtainment, but it sounds like it. So insight number 3, just give teen activists a booze budget and new phones and see what happens. All right, how can you launch a global toothpaste brand in a saturated local market? This is a pretty interesting evergreen conversation that doesn't have to directly to do with the COVID-19 pandemic, I don't think. But what are the USPs of the toothpaste? Is there something special in the ingredients? All right. What if you map out all competitor brands on a 2x2 quadrant like this? Maybe like you could have one fresh versus healthy, or going from fresh to healthy, one going from cleanliness to protection as far as I can understand it. To identify a space, you map out all the different competitors in the saturated local market, and maybe then is revealed a space to communicate that ideally would also have a sweet spot, I would add, to, I wrote the post-it. To be honest, it's just like, hey, magician, surprise, surprise. Strategist wrote by 2x2 quadrant. Global brand values, because of course you would have that, and local cultural insight. Then on our green post-it note, we have, give it an insider alternate usage. It's great for cleaning antiques. Is it great for cleaning antiques? Is it great for something else? What if you communicated that? I don't know. The other thing that I added on top of that when I was re-recording the other failed version of this particular video that I hope is a successful one, was that maybe if it's a global brand, there has been other instances where they started in a saturated local market, and how did they communicate in that particular cultural environment, and is there something to learn for your saturated market where you're communicating now? And if it was something that was a success in particular, then it may well have been submitted to awards from a strategic effectiveness or creative standpoint that makes it a lot easier to find the success story. Now, more difficult if it wasn't a success story, but then maybe you can find out from your client and work with your client. But I know sometimes it can be tricky to get those past information, who knows, it might be a pitch, so you never know. And in pitches, are a little bit more difficult to find out. So, how do I get to pull off a great concert in a post-COVID world where people are scared to go out? It's a great question. Set a deadline and plan it out as you would a client project. Set interval deadlines. Keep it focused. Okay, that sounds like a very practical answer. Health trumps everything right now. Is it a good time to have a great concert? If yes, it may be a small attendance or distance concert, depending on your local recommendations. Getting people to do something unhealthy is probably not a great idea. Yeah, overall, I mean, it might not be the best answer to the question, but at the same time, it's like, as long as it is unhealthy to get people to gather, then probably you don't want to try to get people to gather. It sounds like the obvious answer. And then 3, maybe give people an option to listen as loud as they want on a personal headset, like the silent disco. What if you did a silent disco concert so that everybody can enjoy the concert live, but have a safe distance? Or would it work if there's a bunch of small speakers? So like set areas, so you have a multitude of small speakers around rather than big ones that are booming from the front of the concert. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know how big the concert is, what kind of means you have. So we're back at the toothpaste. We've got 3 more. How do I keep my team connected whilst working from home? That's a great question. Everybody's got that question right now. Well, not everybody, if you are working from home. So encourage social connection as well as more formal ones. Create rituals to draw everyone together. Rituals are really good to draw everyone together at key times. I think, and I would add, listen, what do people want as rituals? So you're not adding more weight on top of what they're already doing. Encourage regular communications through Slack, etc. Sure. Find out what they need, I would say. Galvanize the team every morning with a Zoom call. Yeah, again. Ensure everyone knows what they're doing and feels supported. And the supporting part, listen, tell them... Third answer, bad guys. Tell them you hacked their laptop webcams and are watching them. I'm watching you. I'm watching you. Yeah, that'll do great in keeping them connected. But I don't know. Maybe there is some idea there. How can I help my client feel more comfortable making decisions during COVID? That's also a great question. Fear, paralysis, that's affected all of us right now. Or in the past few months, I mean. First idea, understand your own peak times to take on the meatiest projects when you're at your best. Okay. Some of the best leaders lead from the back, and after listening, perhaps showing numbers explaining businesses who weather storms the best are those that keep communicating and innovating. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I've seen numbers that to say so, that businesses that keep communicating during the worst of the storm in whatever way they can. I'm not saying maybe you should shift your budgets around if you can't afford to be on TV, but then one of the other things that happens, and this is a flight or fright mechanism, this happens directly in our lower brain, reptilian brain, limbic system, is that we want to react to the threat that we're seeing, right? So your client wants to react to the threat, you're reacting to the threat, and if you can say, okay, let's stop for a second, let's take a breather, let's stop and think about what we're doing, then you can look at what are the best decisions to be made. And that means probably giving your client a time and space to be able to stop and think, and whatever the best way is for that particular client. What is the bad guy green answer? Give them a massage voucher, and once relaxed, tell them to stop being a baby. Okay, great. But that said, massage can be a good idea. How can I balance personal branding with my work? Interesting point. Go to bed half an hour early so you can get up half an hour earlier and do that half an hour every day each morning. All right, practical answer, works. I had 2 pink answers here, or at least I seem to have 2 that were matching that. Concentrating on the audience, waiting for your piece on thought leadership. They don't want to miss your input. Great answer. Looking for both to overlap as much as possible. That makes sense. Actually, it's pretty close to the green answer. Spend more time personal branding on work hours. Yeah, sure. Just overlap them one way or another. So that's what we had. And we had a few more other inputs that were a little bit lost. So we have all this panel of different colors by the end of it. Again, I added this thing to ask people not to move things around. Sorry if I'm giving you. And just very briefly, I'm going to go through my end slides. And because this is a recording again, I apologize. We're not going to go through Q&A, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to go through Q&A, but of course, feel free to ask me any questions at any time. So just to make sure I show this, all sorts of kind of services. I offer all the services that a strategy consultant can offer, particularly geared toward marketing, communications, and brand. I am, as I said, very interested in working with responsible, committed companies, more and more looking at developing a model to look at the lens of what is a brand from a much wider perspective than your communications, because today you can't not include people, is my way of looking at it. And people means the responsible impact on society, your employees, because they talk about your brand and about your business, and people at large. So that's collaborators, that's vendors, that's partners, that's, of course, your audience, your customers, your clients at large, because they talk with each other on social media. And we know more and more and more, you cannot ignore that. That is an integral part of your brand right now. So anyway, that's like a tangent. But yeah, I've worked on innovation. I've worked on a lot of market research, one-on-one interviews, moderating focus groups, running workshops, doing very traditional work with advertising agencies as well as directly with client. Also coaching, and my work may well take the form of coaching. I've been teaching as well with schools, etc., etc. I've said this several times during the workshop, and I want to finish with a few slides. Listening. I can always recommend listening. Stop, listen, be interested. Like, those are really, really worthwhile questions to ask yourself. And these are photos of mine that I made during a trip in Tanzania 10 years ago with a charity called the Great Football Giveaway. I was in southeastern Tanzania, which is an area that has very little budget or investment from worldwide NGOs that are very active towards the north of Tanzania in the Serengeti Park and Kilimanjaro. But the Great this was a trip organized with 10 other professionals in media and advertising communications. And we all raised money to go and give footballs and netballs for kids. And this is a very small charity. They're not pretending they're going to change the world or save it in any kind of way. But the whole point saying that play is a major and essential aspect of child development and human development overall. And that kicking a ball is one of the simple pleasures of life. And they raise money to go and give balls to kids and with pumps. So this was the first time a trip was organized with volunteers, and we also worked with much larger NGOs like Save the Children and charities and international ones. So we went around to schools, to orphanages, to visit much larger NGOs, to give them footballs, to give to the kids that they were working with. And we got to meet kids and play ball with them. And it was just honestly the most extraordinary of experiences. And these are some of the children that I hung out with and played football with. And this was the students in a school. Be kind, also another way. Just be nice to people. And play and have fun. And Black Lives Matter, this is something that we cannot ignore right now. We have a lot of work being talked about, being done in protests around the world, originating in the US, but this is a problem that is not only American, about systemic racism and systemic issues. And this is something, if you don't understand, I'm more than happy to talk about the complex issues that our society is faced with, because as a strategist, that this is something that I tackle as part of my job, to go from how complex a societal issue, problem, challenge, or question is, and trying to find ways to synthesize and simplify it, because we have very simple minds that want to simplify everything. And Black Lives Matter and racism is an extremely complex issue, but also should be simple. So, but overall, the message is play and have fun. So, as I said, my consultancy is called Ice Cream for Everyone. Thank you again to the Network One for giving me the opportunity to speak to this. My thing is playful strategy. If you have any more questions, I'd like to discuss any potential projects, work, fun projects. You want to be on my podcast, you want to chat about games, you want to find out what kind of games I play, I'm more than happy to hear from you. You can find a lot more stuff about me on my website. That's at www.icecreamforeveryone.net. My email is Willem, Willem, at icecreamforeveryone.net. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at icwillem for ice cream, ICWILLEM. And I want a big shout out and thank you to Rafman from purpleheron.co.uk, who really was super nice to do a visual display of the live workshop, because it didn't go the way I was hoping for it to go at all. And it was really nice to see a visual representation. So we had the 5 points of play, we have playful strategy, we got the prisms and triangles, we got the mirror whiteboard, and even Optimus Prime, and a hello from France and Paris. And as I said, thank you so much to the team at the Network One. That's about it for now. As I said at the very beginning, have a fantastic evening, morning, afternoon, good night, and I hope to speak to you soon, and I hope to see you soon in Paris. Bye.